Welcome to Bonded Voices. The episode today is quite a serious one. It's hate, ignorance, and acceptance. Three words that you may not find together in the same sentence, but once we explain where this is coming from, I think you'll be able to look at your own life and be reflective about how this sort of thing has affected you. I'm Ian.
I'm Greg.
I'm Loren.
And again, welcome to Bonded Voices. So, hate, ignorance, and acceptance. Three words. So the first one, we're dealing with an awful lot of hate in the world at the moment, and it's maybe not a new thing. I think it's something that we've had for the longest time. Everyone can think back to historically to the hatred of Armenians, Jews, the Roma, communists, whatever it is. There's a ton of that out there. And then with ignorance, a lot of hatred is born out of ignorance. If you look at racism is probably one of the most ignorant things that you can actually have. Hating people because their skin's a different color or they're from a different part of the world. But then there comes a point, and this is for you both, is that acceptance part, which is at some point, do we get to a point where we just accept that you're never going to change these people and you just take a side?
Well, there's two ways to take the acceptance. There's acceptance in I'm not going to be able to do anything, or you accept it and you agree with it. So there's two bad.
That's a good point.
I mean, you could take that either way. Hopefully, if it's something, that's you look back on it in 10 years and go, oh, that was bad. Hopefully, you're not accepting it in a positive light. But, I think we've talked about this before where you don't want to sit there and argue with someone, or if they're not going to listen to you. So do you accept it? Is that considered acceptance at that point? So you just kind of, okay, I'm not going to talk to them anymore.
Is that acceptance or tolerance?
Is there a difference?
Sure. I think acceptance is, I don't know.
Is acceptance you just at peace with the fact that
you're not going to change them?
You think you're not going to change them, right? And that they have these viewpoints that are against your own belief system, your own ethics, but there's nothing you can say that will ever budge them from where they're at.
Well, we live in a culture where you're supposed to accept everything.
And see, this is why I wanted to bring this one up, because I think it's important to think that you're absolutely right, Loren, right? Our kids are preached, you just accept people for who they are. Really?
Yeah, that could easily go in a very negative light.
And I think a lot of times it actually is. Like, but it's never framed in accept people for who they are, as long as those traits are decent traits.
But there's no asterisks to the you must accept everybody.
But is that to do with this whole idea of subjective truth or objective truth, right? Where, you may think that's bad, but yeah. And I think you've even seen it in the hearings we've had on the anti-Semitism, where these professors and heads of universities are like, well, it depends. What's the context?
But that narrative is based on this specific situation. If you were to change who was persecuted, who were the targeted individuals, it's dramatically different how those presidents would respond. If it was racial, if it was sexual orientation, I'm not sure that those presidents would respond that way.
No, they most definitely would not. It's politically correct, the politically correct world we live in is you have to be the most outrageous and accept it. And so if it is like a sexual orientation, that is can never be questioned.
You know, see, I look at that as it's a real dangerous place to be, because I'm sure there was parts of 1930s Germany where, you know, people who don't know their history, when you look at the camps that were built and the targeting of the Roma, right? And the Roma are basically Romanian gypsies by the Germans. And we're going to clean up the streets and we're going to get rid of all the Roma. And the targeting of them, they may have been a pain in the ass to the society at the time, but not worthy of death camps, not worthy of work camps. And, you know, I think a lot of the German people at the time, and maybe even the Austro-Hungarian, or not Austro-Hungarian, other Austrian, came to the conclusion that, yeah, it's probably just the right thing to do.
So the acceptance in that was the beginning of a slippery slope.
Yeah. Well, absolutely, because then if it, and I think in the same way you've had here, where, and it can be right or left, it's either side of the political spectrum, this whole idea that anyone who walked on the Capitol on January the 6th is worthy of jail time, an old lady heading to the bathroom,
right?
You know, it's that point where in your brain they've come to peace with the fact that, yeah, throw in the clink.
Right.
And I think the same would be on the other side of it with, like, anyone who's, during the Antifa riots, that anyone in the streets, yeah, if they were there, just throw them in the clink. And it's that group punishment idea and that collective punishment, but it's that acceptance piece that, yeah, just let it go, just do it. And then it becomes, rather than everyone having their day in court and everyone being judged equitably and fairly, it just becomes that collective that I think is crazy. So going back to the title of this, right? So I think everyone can think of people in their life who they don't like. I think the next question would be, is that a valid hatred? Or just an ignorant
Well, so
hatred?
here's a question. Because I was trying to think of a way to say this as we introduce this, but because you don't accept something, that doesn't mean hate, right? But in our politically correct world we live in, if you don't accept something, it automatically is deemed, oh, you hate this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never even thought of it along those
just
terms.
because I don't accept something doesn't mean I hate it
or dislike it or anything.
Right. That's not my cup of tea,
right,
or cup of coffee.
I think that's what we're led to believe, is that you either get on the train or you hate the train. Wherever the train's going, you better get on. But I'm not sure I'm not sure if you went and talked to your neighbors about things, if they feel the same way.
You are listening to Bonded Voices. Subscribe to us on your favorite podcast service or on the web at www.bondedvoices.com. Thank you to all our sponsors, and now back to the show.
Well, I think there is still a majority of the population that is tolerant of, hey, you know what? If you don't bother me and I don't bother you, we'll peacefully coexist. You do what you want to do, I'll do what I want to do. And if I do something offensive to you, then I'm probably going to expect to hear from you on this, or vice versa. But if we actually pay attention to what we're being told via different media outlets, it's that, no, we have to be absolutely accepting and on the train, whether or not we agree with the train.
So tolerance and acceptance are two different. They're similar, but they're not the same thing.
Yes.
I could go with that.
See, I think there's a point where, and I look at the difference between intolerance and acceptance. Is acceptance, you come to peace with, you're at peace with it, the decision. Where tolerance, you're not, but you'll just put up with it. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I I'm not in agreement, but I'm going to stop arguing. I'm going to tolerate it. It might be you're on the flight and the kid behind you is kicking the chair, and you either decide to make a big argument about it or you decide to just tolerate it.
See, I think there's a bigger difference, though. I think, yeah, the kid kicking the chair, you can tolerate it because you know that you could escalate it. But you're not just accept. I think the idea of acceptance is saying, he's a kid. It's what kids do. They're going to kick the back of the chair, so I'll let that go. Where you have no intention of escalating that any further. So I'll give you a personal story around this. Difference in belief structure with a friend of mine. They actually hate some of the things I love. I think it's born out of complete ignorance, because it again comes down to that objective truth. They believe the truth they believe, even though the sky's not bright purple.
Okay.
And I just had to come to the point of saying, you either cut them off or you just accept that they are who they are. I don't tolerate it. I won't agree with them. I won't go along to get along. And I think that's the difference, between tolerance and acceptance. So it's not going along to get along. It's just understanding that you've come to peace with that they're just not a very nice person. Then the question becomes for me is, why am I still in their life? Or why are they still in my life?
Well, I think there's some roots there in one of the earlier podcasts about your circle of friends.
Yeah.
But if they're in your life, you're tolerating them. If you accept that they're not going to be if they're not going to be a positive influence in your life, and you accept that, you exclude them. But if you keep keeping them in your life, that means you're being tolerant.
So what happens if they're a family member?
You have no choice.
So that's where the acceptance piece comes in, right?
So I think if we go back to, because the title isn't arguing what's the difference between acceptance and tolerance.
No.
The topic
it's actually a closed loop for me.
And I think if we go back to the idea of this is based on the way that I interpret this topic is, are we as a society slowly being pushed in a direction of we're being told to be at peace and be on the same page as everybody with every situation that they have, with every special interest, that we need to completely be in agreement with them in every single situation. And that is impossible.
You have to accept it, or you're considered part of the hate side.
And so there's so many conflicts in that concept that it will never work.
But think of it like this, right? You go back to the Vietnam War, and you had soldiers coming home where the vitriol of the anti-war people meeting them as they got off planes, there was absolutely hatred there for them. And I've always thought, how do you get off that plane, walk through that with being spit on, and some people being beaten up and all that sort of thing, and just get on with life and accept that they're part of the society you now live in? When you were drafted to go and fight in a war you probably didn't want. Well, who wants to be in it anyway, right? But and so you've got those things in play there. But as a society, I think during the 60s we learnt to just say, there's people out there that hate me. It's maybe an ignorant hatred, but I'll just accept that they're part of it. But by just accepting it and not doing anything about it, does it help it grow and amplify? And then you just get more of it. Like, you know, even think of recently, like, you've got Palestinian protesters with, like, from the river to the sea.
Right.
Meaning, kill every Jew from the river to the sea.
Right.
And people are like, yeah, I'll accept that. Cool.
Well, and many of, at least what I've been able to obtain, many people view that from the river to the sea as more of a, not as a war cry, not as it's like, oh, it's going to be acceptance, and it's going to be, we all need to be on the same page. And
which is funny that we would have to accept that phrase, but in the actual phrase is a prime example of non-acceptance.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
it's like
absolutely, that's where the chaos exists.
Yeah, accept our non-acceptance,
and you can't accept everything.
You know, I said earlier, I thought think of this as a closed loop. I don't. I'll change my mind on that. I think of it as a Venn diagram where you've got those three circles with hate, ignorance, and there's definitely a crossover, and then acceptance, which crosses over into both of those as well. Like, you know, we know there's neo-Nazis out there. Like, we have two choices. Do you round them all up and execute them all? Or do you just accept that they're out there with their right to say what they say until they cross that legal line?
So, back to your point on acceptance, if we use the analogy of, is acceptance at some point empowerment? So let's use the idea of someone is mispronunciating a word. Let's say that they're a teacher, and they've now taught 10 years of classes of grade school children how to pronunciate this word incorrectly. We now have a significant portion of the population that believes that's the right way to pronounce that word. So that, while not being political, while not being anything else, I think that's a proof of acceptance can actually change that it actually helps support the wrong.
And I think that plays into ignorance across that Venn diagram,
yes.
right?
Well, it spreads ignorance.
Yes.
It makes ignorance acceptable.
So funny enough, I have a friend from the South, and he would always say, instead of "I have an idea," he would say, "I have an ideal." And I'd say to him, "Why do you say ideal? It's idea." And he goes, "No, in the South we say ideal." And to your point, right, that was just one little thing that was always probably through there. And I actually remember going back there, someone else said it, I'm like, oh, it is, he's right. It's like, this is not just him.
Right.
It's something that's been colloquialized down there, but I kept telling him, it just sounds ignorant. The language, English language, is beautiful, and it's there for a reason. Like we're saying, the difference between tolerance and acceptance, right? They're close relatives, but there is differences.
Well, not to purposefully go down a tangent, but let's go. So Siri's voice is not from the South.
Right.
So it's actually your accent that is typically chosen as, wow, this person sounds educated.
Eloquent.
Wow, this is, I need to listen to this. And so it's amazing that just the accent itself. Now we can get back on topic. Sorry for the derailment.
No, but it is related. I think all of that is because, you know, hatred's born usually out of a thought or an idea.
Sure. And
it's usually born out of ignorance. And at some point, like, you'll have, you know, I remember with the Indians in England, it was an awful situation where there was so much negative stuff said about them that was just completely untrue. And it's that whole ignorant propaganda that drove a lot of that racism towards them in England.
Right.
And I think that's important. And I think the importance of this topic is for people to stop an understanding their world, that when you find someone or find a groupthink that is based on a certain amount of hatred, whatever it is, political, racial, whatever it is, and I mean hatred as in I hate those people, that you got to stop and think to yourself, like, wow, have I really got to the point of accepting that I'm comfortable with that?
I don't think people see it as hate. I think when they get so far on the fringes, they've blinded themselves so much that they don't actually see it as hate. They just think that they're in the right so much, they're trying to correct. Right,
and see, that's where I would do this thought with that acceptance piece, that they've convinced themselves that there's absolutely, they are right.
Right, exactly.
So,
So what's our takeaway? What could we do if you're seeing something that you're like, do I accept this or am I tolerating it? Is this hate? Is this ignorance?
So I look at my kids and say to myself, when they say stupid stuff, I think to myself, like, is this just them being ignorant in the moment? Or is it leading down a path of, like, teaching them that hating is good or whatever? And they say, like, I hate that kid. And I'm like, why? Well, he says stupid stuff. I'm like, well, it's childish, whatever. But it's that, I think you nurture that at an early age. And that's why the Nazis and the communists very much went after children and educated them early, and so did Mao as well, right? You get them early.
We're doing it right now.
So not too dissimilar than what's going on in this country.
It's happening here now.
You get them early, right? And so it's for everyone listening, and we'd love to hear your comments at bondedvoices.com, is, are people around you, are you, like, closed within this ven and this, with this circle of hatred, this circle of ignorance? And then, do you then get to a point of just accepting that that's the way you're at? And if you are, I think this is a real wake-up call.
I think it's a great opportunity along that line. What are you truly rooted in? What are your core beliefs, and why are they that? Are they based on fact? What are they based on? To help do a personal assessment on, am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution?
And at the end of the day, it's two of those three, that hatred and ignorance, are never good character builders. So,
no.
So yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Go to bondedvoices.com and let us know what you think. Signing off from this, I'm Ian.
I'm Greg.
I'm Loren.
And we'll see you next time on Bonded Voices.